I remember years ago when I was in grade school, we used to spend hours and hours diagramming sentences. And I look around and I'm sure many of you remember that also. It was an invaluable tool and exercise to help us to learn proper grammar, to understand the structure of the sentence, the thought that was being conveyed. Remember, we would have those lines and we identify the subject, usually the first word in the sentence, then the verb, and then the object, the end or the conclusion of that thought being conveyed. But this practice of diagramming the sentence, I think, had an even deeper meaning as it pointed to the philosophical realities of subjectivity and objectivity. Subjectivity being that personal and unique perspective that each individual brings as they engage the world. Objectivity being the way things are, independent of what any individual might think. And I think sadly we've lost some of this clarity of thought in our current age, particularly the respect of the objective reality of things, that reality of what is, regardless of what one thinks it to be. But we can also have that loss in the appreciation of the subjective. Again, the important insight or perspective that the individual can often bring. Our first reading today, I would propose to you, brings together arguably the most important expression of these two realities ever uttered. Moses, the one chosen by God to lead his people out of to the promised land, is brought to this encounter with God in the burning bush. He is on sacred ground. God calls him by name. And we can almost imagine Moses almost stumbling or stuttering as he asks for that answer if the people should ask, what is the Lord's name? And then he brings together these realities of subjectivity and objectivity in the infinite God. I am who am. It is a revelation that cannot be overstated. God is the eternal subject. He is the one who is acting in all things and at all times. He is the one who is the origin of all things. He is that first cause of all that is. And so he is constantly acting to define and guide and shape all things. But he is also the who am. He is the eternal object of all things, the one who is our destiny, the end of all things, which is life with him for all of eternity, our goal, the one to whom all of us are journeying each day. We have to keep this truth in our minds, because if we don't, we will then replace the God who is and from whom all things exist with the I. We will start every sentence with that subject, I, the ego. And we will be consumed with what we think or what we want or what we would like things to be. And that will only lead to frustration and desolation. But if we keep God first, where he is, then we will see all things in light of his action, all things flowing according to his plan. We will always remember again that he is acting at every moment to sustain us and strengthen us. He is always offering us his mercy and his peace, and that he permits things to occur, even sin and suffering, because he respects the freedom he has given to each human person, and he knows how to bring good from it. St. Bernard of Clairvaux, the great 12th century doctor of the church, puts it so simply in one of his essays. When he concludes the essay and he gets to the end, he says, "This is the key to the spiritual life." When we think of ourselves, we are filled with sadness and loss. But when we think of God, we are filled with joy and peace. St. Paul alludes to this in our second reading, where he's reflecting that although all who followed Moses were different, each a unique individual, they all ate the same spiritual food and drank the same spiritual drink, flowing from the spiritual rock who was Christ. Again, he's imaged in our gospel as that gardener who acts to always cultivate and fertilize the tree so that it might bear fruit. And so let us, in our engagement of all things that are certainly colored by our subjectivity, never fail to recognize the objectivity of things, respecting that you and I do not get to decide what is right and wrong, and what is true, that this has already been decided and given to us by God. And let us also never forget that He is the one eternal subject, acting in all things to lead us and to guide us, so we might follow the path He outlines for us, particularly this time, this Lenten season, in this call of prayer and fasting and almsgiving, so that we too might bear fruit in our lives, in our love of Him, and in our love and service to one another.